Hello, I'm Kevin Hong. I'm a partner at LYC Partners, an executive search and leadership advisory firm. I'm also the co-founder of The Council, a private network for senior executives. And this is Leaders in Motion. Today's guest is Loïc Réthore, an luxury and consumer senior executive with a career spanning APAC since 1996. Loïc has been CEO of Jurlique, Regional President North Asia at Dyson, Nespresso Oceania, Head and Japan President, and held senior roles at Unilever, LVMH, and L'Oréal. Fluent in Japanese, English, and French, he brings deep experience in omnichannel, travel retail, and digital transformation. Loïc, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
I think your experience as CEO is not one-day journey, and would be very interested to have a quick presentation for our audience.
Thank you for your question. So yeah, it's true that, look, I'm French. My accent it is very clear, but I never worked in France. So I started my career in Japan, in L'Oréal Japan, as a VIE, as a young grad, and I actually took the virus of Asia there. I really wanted to stay, and that's what I've done since then. I've been working in APAC across different markets since then. Overall, I've worked 20 years in Japan, 6 years in Hong Kong, 7 years in Australia, and 1 year in Singapore. So I've really enjoyed different cultures and different ways of working in the region. As you mentioned, my career has been focused on brands, consumer goods brands, whether they are luxury brands or premium brands or to FMCG brands as well. And I really enjoy this because it's all the products I've dealt with are actually in very close touch with the consumers. And I think one of the silver lining of my career was been really looking at consumer needs, consumer expectations, and trying to fulfill them by actually proposing some great brand experience across different markets.
Okay, I guess you experienced a lot of different cultures, even though Asia and APAC is a different region compared to Europe. However, Tokyo and Hong Kong and Australia is also very different culture. Do you have any culture shock or cultural differences that you remember that you could share?
Sure, of course. Well, first by starting in Japan, obviously it's actually a very specific culture, and one of the main first memories I have is about the expression reading the air, ukiyomu, because Japanese are actually raised not to show too much their feelings because it's considered to be rude to impose your feelings on someone else. So from the early age, actually, convey their feelings in a very subtle way. And that's why for us Westerners, it's very hard in the beginning to read people's feelings and point of views. And actually they developed, since nobody is really showing a lot of facial expressions, they all develop, I would say, sixth sense to actually guess or to do what they say as reading the air, understanding the concepts and the context without words to be pronounced sometimes. And that I felt quite daunting in the beginning, but after a while, you actually kind of develop these antennas as well. It helps you to develop a very strong skill in active listening. So I guess that has helped me over the years to really be perceptive and to really listen and to really kind of have guess as well what people are thinking. And especially when you go to other cultures, let's say China, let's say Korea, it's another one, Australia or other cultures in APAC, then the active listening skills are very important and help me actually to get into the mood, understand what people were thinking quicker than I thought.
How do you see any differences when it comes to lending global strategy?
Yeah. Well, there are many differences, obviously. One of the things I think that is a common challenge across different cultures in APAC is the perception of time. If you go to China, for example, or Hong Kong, then obviously everything is very quick. People expect you to answer an email within the day, within a few hours. People expect an execution that is going to be very, very quick compared to Europe, I think. On the other hand, in Japan, the perception of time is different as well. So there is some inertia in Japan that actually surprises people who first land in that country. Things can take longer. And one of the reasons why execution of a plan can take longer is that Japanese often are very precise in their planning, very detailed, and they expect, when they are expected to execute a plan, they expect that this plan is very detailed, organized, and explained to everyone. So, and once this is done, then the execution is perfect and very quick. But before that, it takes time. So I think the perception and the approach to time execution is very different across different cultures in APAC. So I think that's one. If we want to talk about Australia, basically, I think it's going to be very obvious, but it's often something that is overlooked, is the geography. Australia is huge. It's a huge continent which is empty and is populated around on the shores, especially on the east shore and the south. But it's mostly empty. So especially now with the development of the business model, which are D2C, internet, you buy online, you ship, and then the expectation that you need to deliver within one day, then there's a lot of challenges around logistics costs, because basically it's very expensive to ship, for example, something from Sydney to Perth. It's on the other side of the continent. It takes 5 hours to fly from Sydney to Perth. So a lot of companies, while they understand obviously that the geography is different, often overlook the logistic issues. So what's the warehousing strategy, for example? How many warehouses do you want? How do you ensure that you have the best shipping cost as well? That's a big hurdle, especially when it comes to consumer goods, because again, the D2C business model is expanding, and it's more important to be strong online than before. And that's something that is always, I think, in the way of a global plan that would have actually not been completely thought through according to the geography.
Moving from L'Oréal to Jurlique must have been also like quite different culture and also maybe even a segment. So can you maybe also share a little bit of insights of the differences across sectors, across brands, and how you got from one point to other?
I think for me, it's, different brands have different positionings, different segments, but most importantly, different stories. So I think it's really the way to navigate the differences is really about owning the story and the narrative of your brand. So the more you get into the DNA of the brand you are working, the more you are going to be able to explain first to yourself. For it needs to be congruent with your values, and make sure that you believe in anything that is written on the brand map, but also explaining to your consumers, to your teams as well. So for me, there are differences, but the really one of the most important thing is to have a clear storytelling to yourself and to your teams, that from then it's very clear, the story is very clear for the consumers to understand.
You mentioned about stories, which is interesting in a way that do you see any differences when it comes to travel retail and domestic retail? Anything that changed, what works and what doesn't?
I think first, what changes is that travel retail being quicker. People spend a limited amount of time in the airport because they are on their way to their plane. So you need to grab the attention very quickly. So I think that's the biggest difference versus domestic markets. So obviously everything is based on that. So when you travel retail, you need to make sure that your counter on your stores is very open, or the browsing experience from the consumer side is very smooth. And of course, when it comes to beauty, for example, you need to ensure that your travel retail packs are in front of the counter or the gondola for people to grab. Now, how do you tell the story in that context? That's an interesting challenge, because you cannot have PR, you cannot have a lot of things. So you need to make sure that your shop or your counter design tells a story. It's the store that tells the story. And the second one, of course, is the experience, the in-store experience. So training is important. The right staffing, the right recruitment is so important, because this is your storytelling. On the other hand, on domestic market, you can, of course, have the social media, you have the media, you have a lot of point interaction with your consumers that have more time, and therefore that are more open as well to your stories. So while the stories between domestic market and travel retail market need to be congruent, need to be consistent, the way to tell is different.
Can you tell us more about how store and digital clicks and the challenges to make it happen and the benefit of making it work?
So I think it's a very good question, because now we are in 2025. The companies in the consumer goods world have understood that they need to be or become omnichannel. It's no longer the case that people will only have one or two channels. They want to have the choice, and they actually shop across different channels. So that's not granted. Having said that, most of the companies with legacy have not started as an omnichannel company. So for all of them, it's a journey to transform and to become omnichannel. And of course, it's an easy thing to say, but it's an easy thing to say, but not so easy to do. And often the first reflex that the company have is to go with technology. Let's open a website, let's implement a new tech stack. But actually, my argument would be that it's the other way around. First, omnichannel is not something you just improvise on the back of a software you implement. It needs to first come from the omnichannel vision. What is the function of all your channels? Is your online channel about price, or is it going to be about convenience, or both? Difference between the online and the offline proposition? How do they connect together? They cannot be separate, because the consumers, they don't care where they buy your products. They want to buy your product from your brands, and they go wherever it's easier at the time that they chose to interact with your brand. So my argument is really that omnichannel is mostly about vision and people. And of course, governance. Once you have a vision of what functions which channel needs to fulfill, then it's all about, okay, how do you make them work in terms of strategy, like pricing? Do you differentiating online, offline pricing? Do you not? Do you differentiate as well your portfolio of products, or do you not? Do you give an advantage to some channels, or don't you? And then once you have decided a few points like this, then you need to organize the governance, because governance is key. You cannot have one channel undercutting the other in pricing. So you need to ensure that the planning and the execution of pricing of all the activities is coordinated and governed. And obviously, all this is linked with people. So once you've got the omnichannel governance, so the reason why the omnichannel governance is important is that you don't want any of your channels to undermine the other one. I was in a company, I won't mention the name, where the online channel was very aggressive in discounts in the beginning, and it was undermining the key account team that was selling to retailers. And there was a permanent struggle between the two channels, because retailers were unhappy, first, that the brand would fight with them as a competitor, and second, was not happy because the prices were lower on our website compared to theirs. So there was a never-ending issue. So what we had to put is a governance around pricing and assortment. We had a quarterly calendar, promotional and marketing calendar that was omni-channel. So we were meeting all the teams down, online and offline teams, and where we were agreeing and discussing which offer would be done which week. So it was very tiny work, very detailed work. But since we started this governance, all the noise stopped. So we had no other retailers was actually angry at us anymore. And then we ensured that the pricing was nicely done. We also ensured that the assortments were not the same, so they don't fight with the same SKUs. And not only we had no noise anymore, but we also were able to grow our margin back up, because we were not fighting with each other. So governance is really important, especially if you really want to invest in marketing and to be aggressive, because otherwise one or the other channels may lose or win, and that's not great for the company. And of course, all of this is only possible thanks to people. So you need people. It means that you need to recruit the right people. You need to train them, and they also need to understand what the other channels are doing. So, for example, if you have both a direct retail channel and an online channel, if you go to a direct retail, the salespeople need to understand what is online, what is happening online as well. So they can explain if there are any difference, because again, the customer journey needs to be simplified. It needs to be consistent. I go to a brand store, and I don't care whether the brand store is not in charge of online. It's important that they can tell me what's happening in all channels and explain to me why I should buy where. And even though I don't buy in their store, they direct me potentially online. So I feel as a consumer that it's very consistent. The impression I have as a consumer after that is that the brand is actually delivering a very simple and a very good service. So I also find that one of the issues that most of companies in their omnichannel journey face is when they try to set up digital, they often hire people from pure players because they are top digital talents for sure. And that was the first idea of a brick and mortar retail or brick and mortar person, a company. I want the best from the Amazons, the Googles of the world. And they are very good and smart, but they are single channel. They are pure player. So often what you end up with is a digital island where you've got a great, very sharp, very clever talent coming from digital, doing digital, but that may have difficulties to relate to the other side of the business, which is also important. So you're actually the challenge of setting up a digital team, the challenge of setting up an omni-channel team is to ensure that within the team, people understand both the online world and the offline world and understand both how these worlds are connected and that all these worlds are actually intertwined in the experience and what it takes. And that's actually a challenge that I see often in many omni-channel companies.
You say it's a journey. Omnichannel is implementing omnichannel is a journey. Would you say it's more difficult as a journey to implement omnichannel locally or more at presenting a new initiative to the headquarters for an local omnichannel initiative?
Good question. I think it really depends on the company, how centralized the company is and how open to localization the company is. It also depends on which geographies you are covering because the digital world is separated into two worlds, right? There is the Greater China world with the Tmall's, the JD.com, the Little Red Book of the world that are not connected with the other markets, and there is, of course, the Google world. So if you cover the two sides of that world, then obviously, even from the head office perspective, you need to take into account a level of localization. Definitely, I think. So that's for if you are a China team of a global brand, you need to be able to propose to your to a head office to set up a store on JD or Tmall, and then with all the requirements in terms of assets, in terms of ways to engage, live streaming, live shopping, and everything. So yeah, it depends on that. But let us say that based on this, I think that more and more consumer goods company now embrace this complexity of the world, and therefore I think the execution becomes the issue, and rather than the approval from the head office.
I would like you to discuss a little bit about your career again, digging deeper into mobility and how, well, you mentioned it quickly, but would be interested to know, how do you see mobility when you started 20 years ago compared to now? And if you see this is still an interesting move to go global for international talents, if there are more constraints today than before, if there are more opportunities, if it still makes more sense in the age of working remotely and hybrid work post-COVID. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks. I think mobility, is more important than ever. I think a lot of large groups expect that talents are mobile by default. Basically, if you want a career, you need to be flexible enough and go to countries. Some groups even expect talents to go to tough countries. Some groups actually favor people who have gone through developing countries or not easy countries to work in and then accelerate their career. I think it is big, especially big groups. Even though we are in the world of Teams, Zooms, and video calls, I think understanding local markets only can be achieved if you live there or if you go there very often. So I think it's important. What should someone look at in order to develop an international career? It's really about, I think, really understanding the market means you have to have a high EQ, high emotional intelligence, relate to people, understand, ask questions, be curious. I know it's not a rocket science, but I've seen actually very smart talents, very brilliant people in their home market being sent as expats without being prepared and open and failing big time because things were not working as where they were coming from. And it's a pity. I think groups need to I think it's getting there, but big international groups need to evaluate the cultural agility of their talents, rate them, and develop them as well if they want them to have international career, which is now still the case. Now, from a talent perspective, if you are in the head office and if you really want to take your career abroad, I think you need to first deliver in your job. I think that again, it's not rocket science. It's very easy and Nobody would argue against that. But I think the precondition for any move, anything is, okay, be good at what you do and ensure that you've got some sponsors in the companies and who understand that you are and who advise you how you position yourself in terms of talent pool for expatriation. I would say the second one is to work on the cultural agility, be curious about the markets. It's not because the market looks fancy, nice, that it's an easy one to work in. And I'm a firm believer that soft skills and emotional intelligence and cultural agility are key to anybody who wants to consider an international career.
How would you judge that someone is cultural?
I think there are some indicators or some studies that allow you to do that. And it's like, some leadership styles. They could be 360s. There are a lot of tools that could be leveraged in assessing the cultural agility. For me, it's rather than assessing, is actually, do you have in a head office enough resources to look at all of that and to ensure that it's properly observed? Because a lot of companies have 360s yearly is feedback, peer feedback, and it's whether you have a system that actually pulls data and consolidates this feedback to assess, to have a holistic assessment of your talents.
What do you think are the risks and consequences of having someone not culturally agile being sent to different markets?
I think they can be huge because let's say if you often, for example, the general manager of subsidiaries of large groups often are internally sourced, right? So you want to promote your talents and send them abroad. So you may not recruit from outside for general managers. So general managers are very important roles to run a subsidiary. So I've seen that actually. It was in Korea, someone going there and having the wrong strategy, the wrong execution. So he ended up being shut down from his team because they didn't want to work with that person anymore. So it was more about leadership style. So it can be quite risky. Definitely, because the laws are different, especially employment laws are different. Risks and liabilities are different according to markets. And often when you are in a big group and protected as well, you're sent out to a market that you may or may not know completely. And you are actually, your liability as a director of a subsidiary in such market may be different from what you expected. So it could be risky for the company, but also for the individual.
And how do you choose your local general managers? Do you tend to choose them more because they will be more attuned to the head office, to you, or more attuned to the local market?
Options. When I recruit, I've got 2 or 3 things that I am asking the recruiters to look for in terms of talent. I first say high skills, so hard skills, or experience and skills, quite developed. And the second one is low ego. Because, and this has worked very well for the teams I've built recently, if you have a high-skill, low-ego leader, the person will definitely come with an open mind, trying to understand the culture he or she is stepping into, absorb that culture, and adapt to the operating model. And what you describe, is it better that the person is skewed versus HQ or markets? Well, it all depends on the operating model. If you have an operating model which is centralized, that you want someone who's going to listen to what HQ has to say. If you've got a decentralized operating model, it's the opposite. So depending on the company, I would say hire, but regardless of the company and the operating model, if you hire with high skills and low ego, you're sure to have someone who will adapt to whatever operating model that he can see or she can see in the company.
In your experience, what works best for business?
It really depends on the line of product you are in and on the positioning of the brand. For example, food. If I take food, if you work in food, it's very local because the same food can be consumed different ways in different markets. So you have to adapt a lot of things to the local market. For example, Nestlé has global brand, which is called Nescafé. And I think I remember that the number of recipes of Nescafé is above 150 recipes because it needs to feel the taste of the local markets. So that's why Nestlé manufactures in the local markets with their own factories, and they have their taste is tailor-made to the markets. Now, on the other hand, in Nestlé, you also have Nespresso. Nespresso is coffee as well, but it's centralized. Everything is actually produced in Switzerland, the same blends, the same capsules are the same in all the countries in the world. And of course, they have a lot of variations, and that's how they deal with the local consumption tastes. So they provide a standardized taste. For example, you have a ristretto in Paris, the same taste as in Hong Kong or Japan or US. But if you like lighter blends of coffee, then you have the lungos and different, they have a different intensity. So it's about the coffee specialists, their retail staff to advise you. Kevin, what do you like in coffee? Do you like strong, middle strength or low strength? And then based on that, they actually propose you an experience that will be linked with your purchase. So there are different approaches, and it's coming from, these approaches take into account the fact that the local tastes are different from market to a market, but the positioning is different. Nescafe is more mass market, and Espresso is more premium. And as a more premium brand, the brand wants to be consistent in other markets in the way it's presented and experienced.
There are different narrative around China, and then also like the relationship between Australia and China, also Japan and China, across the entire region. Sometimes it has been a bit more positive, more neutral, more land of opportunities, and other times it has been a bit more of threats. How do you see that influencing decisions when it comes to commitments to markets or patience for development?
So short term, it hasn't for me, because I think when you look at the situation, just the question you want to ask is globalization moving backwards or not? And will the links between the different markets go backwards or not? Currently, the supply chains and the markets are so intertwined and so integrated into each other that I don't believe the globalization is moving backwards. But definitely it's challenged because of the tariffs, because of the different communications war sometimes we got. Having said that, the businesses need to continue doing businesses. So mid to long term, I think that it will not go backwards, and the exchanges between these markets will continue. Now, short term, it's very disruptive because it creates a lot of instability, volatility. We don't know if the tariffs are going up, down. And I think it's really important that people stay calm and look at the option in a very cold manner. So for me, as I was in charge of a global company, we have not made very quick calls to change pricing or supply chains routes, because things have gone back to previous states and we've been operating as before. Now, it doesn't mean it has to continue. It means that the boards, the CEOs, and the management teams need to continue monitoring the situation very, very regularly, but keeping cool head is very important. The challenge of boards is to actually build their own capabilities to reflect the world challenges. So if I was a chair of a board, I would really look at how educated is the board in terms of global expansion, tariffs, and exports. That's the one, but it's not the only challenge. The other challenge is AI. How educated are the boards about what's happening in AI and how to leverage this technological revolution? So there are a few challenges that will be always important for the boards to keep their eye on, and that's definitely something to keep in mind. That's why I cannot answer really clearly the question, because I would say different boards have different capabilities. But when you have a company that is mostly regional, and therefore the board is mostly regional, that's one of the challenges they need to work on quite importantly.
You've been through COVID times and you've been through tariffs, and how was it for you in the companies you worked for at the time? How challenging was it, and how successful eventually you managed to turn around the situation?
Yeah. So I think during COVID, I was in two companies, Dyson and DFS. When it comes to Dyson, I must say that we managed COVID in a way that became in our advantage. The very reason why is because we were omnichannel. So when the COVID had an impact on traffic in the stores, but what was good is that we pushed actually all our marketing activities to online, to our online channel, to capture the customers where they were, and they were at home. So we could actually, I was in Japan and Korea, and we could actually shift the dial and move customers from offline to online because they were at home. In addition, of course, the categories of product sold by Dyson were air purifying, which was very spot on for the COVID areas. People wanted to have clean air, so they would buy a lot of air purifiers. And also they wanted to clean house because most of the families were in their homes, so vacuum cleaners. So we were actually helped by this demand and also the fact that we were omnichannel. The second company I was during COVID was DFS. It was the other way around because it is mostly a brick and mortar airport and downtown retailer, and that was very much impacted, definitely. So what we had to do is actually in order to mitigate the impact of COVID on the P&L, was a renegotiation of the lease with the landlords, and that was done as well. So I would say that, but you can just cost structure in terms of optimization. And if you don't have an online, in this instance, if you don't have an online channel, that way it hurts. I would say, again, I'll come back to Omnichannel, which is a bit my favorite topic. The best way to mitigate any pandemic or any big issues is actually to diversify your channels and ensure that your online channel is significant enough that it can actually cope with any issues you have in traffic in the offline world.
You discussed about you shared your experience with Dyson, and we know that today there are a lot of also competitors to Dyson. And how do you see emerging markets players, and how did you deal with the situation, the local competition, and do you see also local competition going global, and what does it mean for Western players or global players in general?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good question. When I look back at Dyson, one of the main emerging competitors we had, or some of them, were local ones, like in China was Xiaomi, and in Korea with LGs and Samsungs, and in Japan we have Hitachi, for example, and they all had different approaches. On one hand, Xiaomi was really quick to actually imitate, kind of launching new Me Too product of the Dyson new products. LG and Samsung in Korea were innovating and often launching more expensive machines than Dyson. So they were not even trying to undercut the price. They were above the price. And in Japan, it was interesting. Hitachi actually worked on the price, but also the weight of the vacuum cleaners. They actually launched a very light vacuum cleaners that actually took away some of the market share in Dyson, and then we had to launch weight vacuum cleaners to bring it back. So the local competitors can be a challenge for a global group because they're all different and they all know the market more than the global brands. So that's the issue. And when they find a recipe that can be exported, then they go abroad and they go to other markets. So we see, for example, Dyson, we see a Shark Ninja or Shark, taking share from Dyson in different markets as well, because they have a recipe. They are both innovative and also, they tend to be cheaper as well. So it's always a challenge when you have reached a large size company, to actually remain as relevant as your competitors in every market. That's always a challenge. But I think if you continue, I think the internal challenge is also continuing to innovate at the same pace as you used to when you were smaller. That's also the challenge of many brands and many companies. Once you get to a large size, then you are less agile and it can be less innovative, or the innovation is not as quick. So that's the challenge, because if your innovation continues and if it is relevant to markets, which means that you need actually to have a strong insight from these markets, then competitors can imitate you, launch Me Too product. They will be behind you all the time. But the challenge is mostly internal. How do you make sure that despite your size, you continue innovating and you continue understand your consumers in all the markets? That's not an easy task for a large company.
Share with us some experiences where you tried or managed to build resilience within your company when you saw some risk and potentially you envisioned them and you prepared for them, and by building resilience.
Resilience is a big word because you can use in many areas. You can use it in a supply chain, which is, of course, during COVID, we saw how we were linked with China and how do we diversify. You can also build resilience commercially by actually building a strong insight culture. A lot of companies, especially those who innovate, really need insights from the markets. And as I said, often if you don't organize the insights culture and the insight gathering processes, your insights are stuck in your frontline teams. Like if you have a boutique team, then they are They have a lot of insights, but often these insights are not consolidated at the HQ level. And if they are not, then they cannot nurture the next waves of new products and innovation. For me, building resilience, commercial resilience, is really about making sure that the company listens to insight to the markets, consolidates and digests the insights, and leverage these insights to actually feed the new product development cycle, so the next innovation is even more relevant and resonates even more with the local consumers wherever they are.
I would like to move to how would you describe your own leadership style, maybe in 5 traits, generally speaking?
So I think for me, it's first inclusivity, or being inclusive. Ensure that you create an environment where all your talents feel good and feel that they are safe to speak, safe to express themselves, and empowered to lead their team and do what they think is right. So that's inclusivity. Diversity, and it's intertwined, it's linked, of course, because the more diverse team, the more the team is diverse, the more ideas there are, the more interactions there are, and the more they reflect the market, so that the better decisions you make. So in order to have diverse team, you need to be inclusive to ensure that everyone feels at home in the company. I'm also very flat. I'm not hierarchical, so I really enjoy speaking to everyone, whether it's a salesperson, whether it's a CFO, whether it's an IT manager or call center operator. There is always something to learn in speaking to everyone. While you speak and listen, if you do, and this is the 4th trait, active listening is a key and maybe an underrated leadership skill. When you practice active listening, not only you understand the company and the team very, very well, but also you show respect to the person who talks to you, because that person feels that you are really seriously listening to him or her. And so there's a double interest, double objective to do active listening. And that's, I think, a very powerful tool, because from that, if you do that regularly with everyone, then you really build a trusting environment. And this is the last trait, I would say. I think I've always tried to create a trusting environment so people feel safe and the teams actually work in a very smooth way.
When you're looking for your successor, would you be looking for the similar traits that you described in terms of leadership? And if yes, what would be the traits that you find harder to find locally?
Thank you. It's not an easy one to answer. So when I hire, I would say, and it's a repeat, but I would actually look for good experience and high hard skills, but low ego, because of course it provides actually inclusivity, and provides the good foundation for the person to adapt and create a safe space to work. But what I would say is that I would hire someone as my team member. I would hire someone who is stronger in their field than I am. I really take for granted that the people who work for me need to know better their area than myself. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I don't want to be a multi-specialist of every fields. I want people who know well their fields to actually sometimes teach me or help me learn on their fields. But I am also looking for someone who is curious and could actually expand their skills, because that's the base. If someone doesn't want to learn, is not interested in something else but his or her field, then they will basically have difficulties to grow out beyond their current role. So I think it makes sense to hire people to be able to groom them, to develop them, to go to larger roles, and therefore they need to have the mindset of learning. Now, I'm not sure there are differences between the different markets, but because I think you can find these attributes in most of the markets. The thing is that it's hard to find, right? You need to really work with the recruiting agencies so they understand really the brief, and of course have multi-interview processes. That actually is important. Not only HR and myself, but also peers of the leader, to see if there is first a cultural affinity, but also interest to learn something else.
And when it comes to market differences and specificities, in a way that if you look at countries in China, you would have leaders, even though displaying very strong local leadership, they would be not as vocal, right? They would not be as vocal when it comes to speaking up about issues and challenges for the local markets, while you would have people more straightforward when it comes to the more European leaders. Is it something that you sometimes look for in the market, but it's a bit harder when it comes to leadership? I think this is really about leadership here.
Yes, yes, you're right. In some East Asian markets, Japan, China, people may not be as vocal, especially in collective meetings. Western markets a bit more vocal. Having said that, I consider that it's my role as a leader to ensure that everybody has a say and everybody can express themselves. So what would happen in a meeting where only a few people would speak, then I would actually ask before the meeting, ask the others to give their opinion and not leave them without saying nothing. So it's really what you were describing is completely true. There are differences, but I really feel that it's the job of the leader to understand these differences and ensure that everybody has a say.
Thank you, Loïc. That was really nice to have you on the show. Very insightful. Thank you very much for your insights. That was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Leaders in Motion. And if you want to go further, join the Leaders in Motion Academy, our executive program. The first step is simple. Subscribe to our newsletter in the show notes, and you'll get access to our exclusive insights and all the details about the Academy. This podcast is produced by Melanie Hong, who helps leaders and organizations create strategic podcasts. I'm Kevin Hong, and